Hi, I'm Gerardo Mariscal, and my topic of discussion was Mexican immigration throughout the years of 1940 to 1970. And I'll be talking about general background information on Mexican immigration to the U.S. first. So, in about 1890s, there were new industries in the U.S., especially in the Southwest, where there was the mining and the agricultural spike right there, which was something that interested the Mexicans in finding some work there. Um, Mexicans also left their rural areas for stability and employment, which is something they could not find back home. It was very rare to find days of work there, and unfortunately, if they didn't have a day's work there, they wouldn't even be able to feed their families. So they were just looking for something consistent in their life, and yeah. And 20 years later, in 1910, was it? Yeah, the Mexican Revolution had started and increased the war refugees into the U.S. And they were trying to escape the violence that had been occurring from Mexico and also start somewhere there. And the number of legal migrants grew from around 20,000 migrants per year during that time in the 1910s to roughly 50,000 to 110,000, which is crazy in the matter of like back then with transportation and stuff. So when the depression had hit in 1929, the entire industries were pretty much drying up and slowing down. So that means the immigrant workers really didn't have work. So they went back to Mexico. Around tens of thousands of them were going back just to find more work there. And even hundreds of thousands were being deported back to Mexico. Um, so, on to the topic. From 1940 to 1970, the attack of Pearl Harbor actually was a good start for Mexican immigration because Congress had actually negotiated a set of labor agreements with Mexico for the importation of laborers for help during the war actually, and they would actually call them braceros, which was means arms in Spanish, and they were actually Mexican men who just worked with their arms to give extra help. And the bracero program was packaged as a wartime emergency measure to protect their agricultural production, and also so they don't have to raise the prices, and inflation was also a factor. So, and that program actually ended in 1964. And between 1942 and 64, approximately 4.6 million guests worker visas were issued by the U.S. to them. So, and during the same years, the INS deported 5.5 million unauthorized Mexican workers. Later, the INS highly publicized a campaign known as Operation Wetback, which 1.2 Mexican illegal aliens, which is what they like to call them because they weren't from here, of course, called them and arrested them mainly in Texas and California, which was a highly population of where all the illegal Mexicans were at. And employers simply didn't put a lot of thought into this either. They had a ton of illegal immigrants working for them, and they didn't really care about the immigration laws whatsoever. And roughly 800,000 Mexicans were entering the U.S. by 1964. And going into 1960, Kennedy ran a platform of immigrant contributions to America, and Kennedy promised like immigration reforms if elected. However, his assassination left Johnson in charge to take over, and uh, they had the Hart-Celler Act, also known as the Immigration and Nationality Act. Excuse me, as the Immigration Act of 1965, and he was going to let like immigrants come to America based on like skills, and if they had like close relationship back here in America, and Mexico had to compete with other countries essentially because they only had 120,000 visas available to give out, which there were roughly like 600,000 unauthorized Mexicans here working, and they became very vulnerable to like America, and portable as well. And that act actually pretty much backfired on like the Mexican workers, leading them to also try to stay low without any protection from that. So, yeah.